When you're finished watching the lecture, don't forget to go on Edline to the assignments folder and take the quiz called Other Patterns of Inheritance. When Mendel was studying the 7 traits in pea plants, one allele always turned out to be dominant and the other was always recessive. Looking at your own family, I'm sure you know that human genetics aren't always that simple. There are some traits that are passed on this way, like dimples, earlobe shape, hair on your fingers, a widow's peak, and the ability to roll your tongue, to name a few. This pattern of inheritance is called simple dominance, where one allele is dominant and the other allele is recessive. However, many other traits in humans and other organisms are more complex than this. There are 4 other patterns of inheritance you will learn about in this lecture. They are incomplete dominance, codominance, multiple alleles, and polygenic traits. Incomplete dominance is when 2 true breeding parents produce offspring with a phenotype that's a mix between the 2. Neither of the parents' appearance is visible. This is an example of a flower called a snapdragon, where flower color is incompletely dominant. In the picture, you can see 2 true breeding parents. One is red and one is white. Capital A is used for red, even though it's hard to say that red is really dominant. Remember, dominant means that the allele can mask another allele for the same trait. But with snapdragon colors, this isn't exactly true. The red color is not completely masking the white, which is why this pattern of inheritance is called incomplete dominance. The important part to remember here is that in the F generation, the offspring don't look like either parent. Neither of this pink flower's parents are pink. It gets interesting when the F1 flowers are allowed to self-pollinate. Now the red and white show up again. The phenotype for a A plant is a red flower. The heterozygous phenotype is pink, and the other homozygous phenotype is white for plants with little a. Sometimes you'll see different letters being used instead of a capital and a lowercase because, again, the red allele doesn't really fit the definition of dominant. So sometimes you might see, for this example, a red or capital R allele and a capital W allele for white. Some other examples of incomplete dominance is curly and straight hair. If one parent has curly hair and one parent has straight hair, offspring will have wavy hair. Again, a phenotype in between the 2 parents. When making a Punnett square for a trait that's incompletely dominant, you would need to be told that the trait was passed down by this method of inheritance, or you would need to be given a specific example like the red, pink, and white flowers or straight, curly, or wavy hair, and be able to recognize that the heterozygous phenotype is a mixture of the 2 homozygous phenotypes, and therefore the pattern of inheritance is incomplete dominance. Similar to incomplete dominance is codominance. Co means together, like co-captains. So codominance means that there's more than one allele for a trait that can mask others. In fact, if a person is heterozygous for both of the dominant alleles, both traits will show up equally, and you will easily be able to pick out both parents' phenotypes. For example, let's say that on a particular type of mythical creature, blue spots are codominant with red spots. This means that if a homozygous blue-spotted parent bred with a homozygous red-spotted parent, that the offspring would have both blue and red spots. No mixing. Both parents' phenotypes are easily distinguishable. Some blue spots, just like one parent, and some red spots, just like the other parent. A familiar example in humans is blood type. Both type A and type B blood are codominant. Blood type refers to a particular carbohydrate on the surface of red blood cells. Someone who is homozygous for type A blood only has type A carbohydrates on their red blood cells. Someone who is homozygous for type B blood only has B carbohydrates on their red blood cells. And someone who has type AB blood has both type A and B carbohydrates. It's also possible to have a recessive phenotype with no carbohydrates on the surface of your red blood cells, and these people have type O blood. It's not exactly correct to say that they have no carbohydrates on the surface of the red blood cells. There are plenty of other carbohydrates that act as markers, but the gene that produces A, B, AB, and O blood types are the most famous. Codominant genes are written a little strangely. The dominant allele is given a capital letter. In the case of Blood type, this capital letter is I. Don't ask why. Each of the dominant varieties is written with a superscript capital letter like the A and B on the capital I allele. The recessive allele is written as a little I. Again, don't worry about figuring out which genes are codominant. You'll be able to tell because you're specifically told, or you'll be given an obvious situation that follows the pattern of blood type or the made-up polka dots I talked about earlier. Multiple alleles means that if we look at the entire population, more than just 2 alleles exist for a particular trait. I guess you can technically say that any codominant trait would have to be multiple alleles because it has more than one dominant allele plus a recessive allele. Hair color in humans is passed down through the pattern multiple alleles. All of the alleles in this picture are hair color alleles for brown hair. Each individual has 2 alleles, but within the population, there's lots of alleles. Polygenic traits are very common in humans. It means that more than one gene controls a trait. For each of those genes, you have 2 alleles, just like any other gene. Skin color is an example of a polygenic trait. There are 3 genes that control skin color, and for each one, you can be homozygous dominant, homozygous recessive, or heterozygous. The more dominant alleles you have, the darker your skin is, and the more recessive alleles you have, the lighter your skin is. The Punnett square you see here is a 3-factor cross, looking at the possible offspring of 2 individuals heterozygous for all 3 skin color genes. At the bottom, you can see the phenotype ratio for this pair. It's possible, but pretty unlikely, that they would have children with either very light skin or very dark skin. Don't worry about being able to do a 3-factor cross like this. And if those patterns of inheritance don't make it complicated enough, your phenotype is not only the result of the genes you inherit, but the environment that you're in. 3 examples. Let's say a plant has genes for a tall phenotype, but then you never water the plant. It's not going to be tall. Or the other way around. I have a cousin who's always been very small, and he has a short grandma and a short father, but he started taking growth hormone shots when he was about 10. He doesn't have the genes for being tall, but he's a sophomore in high school and about 5'8", so not especially tall, but also not especially short. If you have genes for a high risk of heart disease, but you eat healthy and exercise, you may never get heart disease. It's the nature versus nurture question, and the verdict is that in many cases, it's both.